I love how you can have a theme song in like 20 seconds now. Just
really
plug it in.
And Suno has rolled out some crazy tools over, like version 4, I think, that just came out it's, I don't want to say it's indistinguishable, because it's definitely still distinguishable if you have ears for audio, but really cool tools. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Cameron. I'm head of community here at Rad TV. And today we have the founders of Blockade Labs joining us. If you have not checked out Blockade Labs, go to our X feed right now, follow them, check out everything they're doing. They are building some incredible tool sets. Right now we have Adam B. Levine up here on stage with us and our CEO, Tony Mugavaro. And we have been really looking forward to this space. It's a tool we are actually using. We're integrating this into our apps. It covers a lot of bases for creators, AI worlds, tons of stuff to talk about, and we're really excited to have Adam joining us today. Thank you very much for your time, King.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here. And just on the Suno thing, I did a song over the summer on version 2 and version 3, because you use 2 for one part and 3 for the other. Mm-hmm. I found out that I listened to it 550 times over the course of the 2 weeks.
Wow.
Wow. It became the only song that I listened to for like 2 weeks. So I think that's something that you don't typically get with modern music, is it's hard to find a song where it's like, I'm literally going to sit here and listen to this thousands of times.
Did you just love it that much? Or is it just like what?
Oh, it just hit just right, man. Had such nice dirty drums and just like, wow. Oh man, it was so good. I found these. I found random lyrics that someone else had written that made no sense, but I just loved them. And it just said things like, your face was ugly like the moon, but I wanted to kiss it, and stuff like that. It's just like, again, like the era of intense personalization of content creation, where content goes from being like, cool, you need to have like 10,000 people who are interested in this, to no, you need to have one person who's interested in this. And it can be, super high quality. Like, that's just the coolest thing ever.
On demand has taken on an entirely new meaning in like the last 6 months, and I guess a couple years now, but really it just seems to be evolving so quickly. It's on demand means something totally different to everybody, and the future definition of that gets even sketchier. Of like, what does that even? Is it going to be the Simpsons,
Neuralink?
Yeah, Simpsons world with Ninja Turtle characters and powered by Neuralink. So on demand thoughts equal my content is, and that's what you're building, Adam. So let's start there. Give us a little bit of background on Blockade Labs. Where did the idea come from? When did you guys start this process? And what's the quick journey to this point today of releasing Blendbox? I just tried it out this morning. Incredible tool. Give us a little background on how you got started and what you guys are up to. I saw you just released something today. Share anything about that you'd like as well.
Yeah, for sure. So what we just released today. So what Blendbox is basically kind of like a ground up rethinking of how creation of AI artwork should work, and it moves it away from a sort of only text-based prompt type of thing and towards what we think of as a compositional model, where the user, rather than being responsible for putting together, a paragraph of descriptive text, instead is responsible for just creating the components and then arranging them spatially, and then letting the kind of AI art part fill in the rest. And so it takes what is, traditionally, and I say traditionally about a process that's only really existed for 3 years. Traditionally, what was, sitting there and pressing the kind of redo button over and over again, and then being like, yeah, this is pretty cool. To one where instead you're just kind of incrementally pushing closer and closer and closer to your ideal, and you kind of never have to start over. So it's still really, really early days on what we're building over with Blendbox. I have been, talking about it like, the house that is AI artwork in the traditional sense has been getting built by lots of people for 3 years. And so it's pretty far along. Whereas what we've essentially released here is a foundation, but it's kind of a fundamentally new foundation that will lead to kind of more impressive constructions on top of it. So we're really excited about that. Going back to the kind of beginning, Blockade Labs started as a company called Blockade Games, founded in 2018, built the first large-scale free game powered by crypto and tokens and NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain. It was called Neon District. Raised a bunch of money there. I was not with the company at that time. That was kind of how Marguerite got her start, and they did that for a few years on that side. Meanwhile, I had been creating a company getting into the early 2000s called 330 AI that built some really early kind of what's it called, Mid-Journey style Discord bots a couple of months before they released theirs. But we thought that Discord bots were not going to be a form factor that normal people would be interested in. And so we wound up building out a whole kind of web-based platform and stuff like that. And turned out we kind of missed that opportunity a little bit. So long story short, I come together with Marguerite deCourcelle who I had known since 2014. We did some of the first kind of blockchain non-currency token projects on a platform that I built starting in 2013 called Let's Talk Bitcoin. And so we had known each other for a bunch of years. And in 2021, we decided we were going to merge our companies together and take kind of the expertise on the games and creative side on their side and the expertise on the ML side and kind of the platforms that we built for us. And that all happened over the course of about 2 months. Pretty much instantly, we started building this product that we called Skybox AI, launched it coming up on 2 years ago in February. And that was kind of an instant hit. And then since then, we've pretty much been off to the races. So Skybox AI, which you can visit at skybox.blockadelabs.com, it generates 8K kind of immersive skyboxes. And we're getting really close to having the lighting side of it also fully worked with like 32-bit lighting information as opposed to the standard 8-bit stuff that we've been working with to date. And then, built out that for a couple of years, working with really big companies, basically plugging it into, services like yours so that people can just generate skyboxes and generate environments on demand really whenever they want. And then more recently, over the summer, we kind of did a little internal hackathon and built, the first version of Blendbox. And we're like, wow, this is really cool. And then decided to take that on as our second product. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more. Thanks for that background. Tell us a little bit more about Blendbox and what that is, how it kind of is an iteration or the next evolution of the Skybox AI and what you can do there. I know I had the question about 10 days ago or something of like, I wish we could upload some images to be a part of this or a logo or something to make it more rad branded. And that seems to be exactly the question you guys answered with this.
Yeah, so Blendbox is actually a really ambitious product, and what we released right now is what we call kind of the initial alpha. We did just release alpha 1.1, and it does include uploaded images. But essentially, like with AI art, as with really any disruptive technology, there's this thing that you have to do, which is when you arrive at the scene, the only thing that exists is the technology as it currently stands, and then examples of what people have already used prior versions of the technology to create. And so you're faced with this really interesting kind of challenge. This was true in blockchain as well, but it's so much more true in AI because the technology is moving so much faster. Where you look around and it's like, okay, well, we have the opportunity to either look at what other people are doing that we think are successful and do something that we think is a better version of that. Or we have the opportunity to essentially throw out, all other examples and be like, well, if you were going to build it today, how would you build it? And this is relevant in AI art because 3 years ago, when we started working with the technology, the very early versions of VQGAN plus Clip, that took a GPU about 5 minutes to create a very small image, very poor quality. And so that was kind of the process. And so the first things that we did really kind of built around that idea because as you're sitting there for 5 minutes, you'd be like, oh, cool, I just saw it move, right? Because it would kind of, you'd see it update. Fast forward 3 years, when we were building the early prototype of Blendbox, we were able to squeeze somewhere between, I think, 90 and 115 images per second of superior quality and superior size out of a single GPU. Wow. And so that shows you kind of,
Crazy.
Yeah, the escalation and the optimization that's happened in kind of the world of AI art in terms of just speed is so significant that any decision that you made, last year, much less 3 years ago, is just wrong now. And so that was kind of where Blendbox wound up coming from. It was like, well, if you were going to take this reality, of what we can do today, and you were going to say, well, how would you build it if you were just taking today and not taking assumptions about, or looking at examples of how other people have done it, in the recent past, what would that look like? And to us, that was what wound up being Blendbox, which was sort of the ability to, again, to think in pieces as opposed to having to think in whole, right? Like, one of the things I always really like to do, we all have, if you're in AI art, you have your kind of go-to prompts that you use to test stuff, right? And for me, one of those has always been Cthulhu Farmers Market, right? It's like the concept of like the old god type thing, with like tentacle face and stuff like that, mixed together with a prosaic farmers market. And that's a concept that has been really hard to get kind of done right. Models are starting to get there now. But again, it's just like, one of the guys who we were working with to build this for us was like, well, what I'd really like to use this for is I was trying to create a shirt design for my wife, like just as like a joke to like buy her for her birthday, right? And it would be like at the top it says bad, and then in the middle you've got a picture of a donkey, and then at the bottom it says girl, right? And so it's the joke is badass girl, right? And so you would think that something like this would actually be very simple to do because it is so simple in terms of the components. But in terms of actually getting something to do that in a way that you could then actually use as an asset to create the thing that you wanted, it turns out to be really hard. So again, like that, all of these things lead to but if you just literally create the components and then arrange them and then use the AI again as another layer to put it all together, then actually you can do something like that really easily. So
Incredible.
yeah, so I'll talk about the phases, but please, I'm dominating here.
No, that's what that's what we want to
Yeah.
hear. And I feel like this is, we're having these conversations with AI creators all the time, and it feels like this is what they're doing anyway. So you're just removing a bunch of work, because what they're doing is they're piecing a bunch of this together, and then the ones that are really on top of it are taking things into Blender or Photoshop or After Effects or whatever it is they're doing, and you're basically saying, come and do all this in one box, the blend box, and you can put those pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically saying that like we have the first one of these products, but we just think this is going to be the way that this stuff gets built in the future.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So it's like, anyways, kind of what we're doing with this thing, and we haven't been super loud about this. We've been kind of unclear on how much we should talk about, but I'm really bad at compartmentalizing, so I'm just going to tell you everything.
Let's go.
So what we launched is called we call internally live creation, right? And it'll get faster over time. Quality will continue to improve. I'm always really focused on kind of where we're going rather than where we are. But the reality of it is that even right now, you can go in there, you can create kind of objects that you want or create different subject matter. You can arrange them. You can kind of watch the thing. Our initial kind of subscription plans are basically like for $10, you get 6,000 images, 6,000 1K images. And so that actually powers quite a lot of sort of experimentation along this. But the thing about it that is limiting in this first phase is that everything is treated the same. Because of the way we're doing the diffusion as fast as we are, there just isn't enough room in there for us to be like, oh, this should stay kind of more high fidelity and this should get really diffused into everything else. So what we use phase one for is what we call rough composition, where you can just iterate really fast, create the kind of rough outline of the scene or the scene itself, depending on how complex it is. But that's kind of just that first step. So the second step is what we call the refine toolkit. And the refine toolkit is essentially all about, now that you've got kind of the broad strokes of your scene put together and your composition put together, now you take that as a given and instead you're like, cool, here's a logo. And then you're like, I want to integrate this deep and I want to integrate this wide. And I'm using the terms deep and wide to kind of abstract some other stuff. But the short version is you get the level of control where it's like, cool, here's the font that I want to use. Here's the text that I wanted to say. And then here's the piece of rock in my composition. Do I want that spray painted onto the rock? Do I want that logo to look like it's etched into the rock? Do I just want it to look like it's floating in front of the rock, right? And so that's kind of what the second phase toolkit is all about. And then we also have a couple of other things in there. Believe it or not, this product, although we're releasing it as a kind of consumer product, the sort of real business play for us in the background is as a B2B2C play, where we're actually empowering businesses to offer this type of service to users who need to be able to create their own art for specific types of business opportunities, but who right now struggle with the current state. And so, so that's kind of phase 2. And then phase 3 is taking all of that, right? So you've now got your rough composition done, and then you've integrated all of the parts into it and really tweaked it so it's exactly how you want it. And now the third thing is, hey, let's relight the thing, right? And so rather than making any changes to the content of the piece at this point, instead you're just creating different lighting schemes. You're moving around sort of virtual light bulbs to create kind of the thing, again, seeing this diffused essentially in real time. And then at the end of that process, you can blend together sort of these different lighting schemes that you've created without using a GPU, just again, kind of with like some sliders and stuff like that. So there's a lot more stuff in there besides that, but those are kind of the big things. And at the end of that process, what you wind up with is the ability to go from, hey, I have this idea to, and here it is, exactly how I imagined, right? And instead of that process being either, hey, I got lucky and it took me, 10 minutes of tweaking a prompt, or realistically more like I spent 3 hours sitting there and clicking the button over and over again, right? And tweaking the prompt to get to one that, I'm happy with. Instead, it becomes, hey, I did this. It took me, 5 minutes to do the composition. I tweaked it for another 4 or 5 minutes, and then I relit it for another 2 minutes. And cool, this project that would have taken me many days, in a traditional workflow, many hours, for inferior results in many cases. And a standard AI workflow is something that I can just do, very quickly like that. So,
Amazing.
So we see kind of huge implication for this, especially as we get to the phase 2 refinement toolkit. That'll really be when the magic turns on.
Yeah, and I also, Tony, Finney, if either of you have questions, feel free to just jump in. So, Adam, on this, when you're creating these assets, are these assets individually exportable, individually controllable to be able to bounce around different buckets, if you will? I don't know what the lexicon you're using is for, like, if I create one piece that I really like and want to add that, can I export that and dump that into another thing? So I'm basically building assets that are interchangeable for this world or this project. And if one fits in another, is that where this is headed? Of each one of these is its own item asset in this world?
Yeah, I think that you've jumped ahead a little bit, but you're
Sure.
right on in terms of directionality, in terms of where we're going. Right now, again, like we really wanted to get this thing out as quickly as possible so we could start getting feedback. So like right now, if you wanted to do something besides a square canvas, you can't do that. It doesn't support any size besides square. But to your point, I think, yes, that's definitely where we're going, is just the ability to, and we're already playing with this internally. That's how, frankly, I was testing most of the upload feature, is pulling something in, like pull in a scene, a picture over here, pull in a character over here, and then just put those things together, creating something new, and then just go through the different styles and kind of just see what it looks like.
I mean, it already feels like you guys are doing that and you're knocking it out of the park. And, when I think about what you're building, what pops into my mind is Ready Player One. And ever since I read that book, it has been top of mind for everything in VR for me, and being a VR-based platform at RAD, being able to go in and generate a Skybox, and then now we're putting those into our PSVR 2 app. So anybody that has a RAD TV PSVR 2 headset, you can go into RAD TV and you're in a Skybox that was generated with Blockade Labs Skybox AI. And we're hoping to quickly roll out a feature where creators can bring in their own Skyboxes and even potentially sell Skyboxes. And this brings up like this whole world creation. And I think a lot of listeners, especially the creators on our side, they want to build these worlds that then exist, that they can fill out with the characters that are now, these models are now able to sustain a character and regenerate a character that is identifiably that one person, as opposed to like a close version of that person. So like real hardened IP that they can take in and out. And I think I see some people emoting, but that's what it feels like you're building to me. And it feels like you guys are way ahead of the curve, and you're the only place that's really building these full worlds. So the fact that you're narrowing it down to assets is really impressive. And I definitely agree with you that that's where things are going. Finney, you got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I had looked back at my notes. I had a call with Marguerite like a year ago, and I had asked her about the possibility to upload 3D assets. Has that come along since then? Is that still on the roadmap? Is that something that's viable?
So you're talking about for Skybox, right?
For Blockade, Skybox, whatever the particular terms are.
Yeah. So I ask for the clarification because 3D objects and Skybox support is coming in phase 2 to Blendbox. As far as 3D assets are concerned for Skybox, honestly, we've gone back and forth on it a couple of times. We do have the 3D mesh mode, and we have all the tech worked out for how to actually take the sort of single perspective Skyboxes and bust them out into what we call mesh completion. So like, hey, there's a tree there, 5 feet away from me. Hey, I can't see behind that tree because we generated the Skybox from that central perspective. How do you solve that problem? The way we're going to solve that problem is with the generative video algorithms that have gotten much better, but are still not quite good enough to actually do the thing that we need.
Sure. So I'm not necessarily speaking about creating 3D objects within Skybox or the issues of occlusion that surface from that. But like, I have 3D assets and I would like to put them into a 3D environment that is, generated or something along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me ask one clarifying question there, which is, are you saying you want to put it in the middle to showcase the object using lighting?
Like navigation to like, are you lighting
it?
Or
navigation.
Around it? Yeah.
So I would say both, but also if I can put more than one, that's really the ideal. If I can put
you would like build a city with your 3D objects and then navigate the city or whatever. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Great question.
And then basically like the distance. So, say like a central area would be navigable, and that is something that like I'd have assets for, but then the distance, the general environment, say the ground and the sky and the far off reaches of view outside of the playable area, that can be generated. And I think that, it sounds like what you guys are doing already. But then potentially even having interactions be generated for characters or script or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I can definitely address this. The potential scope of what you're proposing there is one that very quickly stops being the thing that we're building and starts being a thing that is more like a game engine.
Yeah. Yep.
And we're really trying to avoid building a game engine. so we have
business.
Yeah, I mean, like, oh, man, like, we take on a lot of hard tasks. That's an even harder task, I would argue, to do this type of stuff with well at this particular moment in time. 5-10 years, it'll be different.
An epic task, one might say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so, I mean, we did look very extensively, actually, more than a year ago, at creating essentially a showcase so that people would be able to essentially, when you bust open the 3D generator mode, you would also be able to put stuff in the middle there and like have like a pedestal and, like you've got your shoe design or something. We wound up not doing it because the reality of it is that you kind of need mesh completion for all of that stuff. And Michael, you kind of gave it away where you're like, no, I'm not talking about that. But then you actually mentioned a bunch of things where that becomes a huge issue. And it's like, it's a case by case basis too. So it's like, if you're saying, hey, I want to have like planes that go far out into the distance and where there's nothing kind of close up, then yeah, that would definitely work. And, we could do that pretty much now. We did extensive testing and prototype builds in Unity with a kind of outside team to do that. And but the problem becomes, oh, hey, there's a column that showed up here because it's this type of scene, or, oh, hey, there's a tree that's over here. And then it's like, okay, well, we really do need to solve the occlusion problem. So again, we've got that stuff queued up. We're just kind of waiting for the technology to catch up with us. But it's definitely something that we've thought about before. And also just to say, like, when we started building Skybox, like, you've got the big vision, right? Which is like, what does this turn into 5 or 10 years from now? And then it's like, okay, and then what do we do for the next 6 months? And we're still really on that kind of like, we're not at 6 months, we're coming up on 2 years, but it still is that. So the real kind of thought that we've had for a long time is what we've internally called text to game, which utilizes this concept of sort of specialized AI cascades, where you take like the concept at the top, right? It's like, hey, I want to try playing a game that, is set in Victorian England and it's about the Black Plague, and all the characters are mice and all the lines are sung, right? And it's like, you could say that's a paragraph that describes something that someone could build. If you tried to build that in real life today, that's like a 6-month build, probably a year build.
18,
yeah,
18
like
months,
that's a weird concept, and so you kind of get up there. And so the thought that we've always had is that, well, what we're building is one module in this much larger distributed sort of, world. And there will come a time where you take that paragraph of concept and you plug that in, along with anything else you have up at sort of the top of the stack. And the idea kind of goes down into, here's the plot generation engine. And then from there it goes to sort of the graphics generation engine and the physics and the game rules. And, you kind of go through this whole cascade of all these different things made by all these different companies. And at the end of it, you wind up with, like 3 hours of processing later, a prototype that you can actually be like, cool, yeah, this actually does kind of work. I like this idea, as opposed to, grinding for 6 months, or more likely just never trying it at all, because who's going to spend a year working on that particular concept? So yeah, I mean, we're really bullish on this in the kind of medium term, but there's hard problems to solve in the short term that I think will stand in the way of any serious implementation along those sides for a while.
It's coming though, and I keep
100%.
telling people, we talk about AI and stuff, and people are like, "We're just scratching the surface," and I like to reiterate that, like, no, we're not even scratching the surface yet. Like we're like day one still. It's like we don't have any clue where this is headed. And
yeah, it's just hugely difficult to look into the future on this particular topic, because like 10 years ago, I was doing a podcast on Bitcoin. And we were kind of the big philosophy podcast, looking out into the future, saying, okay, well, based on what's happening and based on what these things are, what's going to happen? And we made a bunch of crazy calls, which so far are looking pretty good.
Looking pretty good today.
And so 10 years later, right, it's like, okay, well, didn't predict some of the twists and turns, but we predicted most of them. But the technology, even though Bitcoin moves at a crazy speed compared to any other financial technology, it still is a total turtle when you compare it with the speed at which AI moves. And so you look at AI and it's like, well, shit, I can't predict 2 years in the future, much less 10 years. And that's crazy, because I'm pretty good at this.
Yeah, I tell my close friends, I constantly say now, like, you can't have a 5-year plan anymore. Like,
totally.
Plans beyond election cycles, like, get out of here. Like,
1 month.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no. Like 2 years ago, when we started working on Skybox, I was still doing 1 year sort of strategic plans, and that just got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And we just finished planning through Q1 of next year. But man, I'm like, well, we'll get to January, and then it's all going to be different, because something will have changed. So it's very hard to plan.
I just saw an interview with Jensen from NVIDIA the other day, and he's talking like pretty candidly in an interview, and he's like, we don't have a long-term plan. We don't have a vision for the future. He said, our long-term plan is like, what are we doing today and what are we doing this week? We can't see that far ahead of what's going to be happening and where the energy is going to go. We're just going with the flow. And I'm like, man, this is a $4 trillion company talking about they don't have a plan.
But it tells you why they're a $4 trillion company in the enviment, right?
Sure,
it's because if you have those rigid plans, you're going to be wrong over and over and over again. So I've been very impressed with NVIDIA, honestly. Like, they've been one of the most kind of forward-looking companies, and just willing to roll with the punches like a small company, and also really focused on optimization. That's the other thing about all of this stuff that's really crazy is, like, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I think it was a keynote or two ago that Jensen gave. He was talking about how not only are they optimizing customers who are their customers, but they've actually taken their technologies upstream to the chip fabs and have been helping them to do their R&D exponentially faster, which then so it's like it's not like one layer of the stack that's getting sped up like this. It's every layer of the stack is getting sped up like this, and they all compound against each other. So again, it just becomes increasingly impossible to try to predict anything. Right. It's like three steps removed.
I wonder if he's got like a personal AI assistant that's like giving him an update daily, because if it's helping them design chips, it's helping them design their software, which then helps them get more out of the chips. And it's like this completely recursive circle at this point. Where is he like making decisions at? Is it like pumped out of a fax machine? It's like beep 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 beep. Here's what you do today, and he grabs a sheet and he's like, "All right, everything's changed. We had no plan, and now we do because the box says this is what we do." And I'm joking, of course, but like, at what point does that become what, like, it just says what it's going to do, and you're like, yeah, it seems like a good idea. Go ahead and do it at your whatever entity I'm talking to.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still waiting for all the productivity tools to become actually really useful in startup land.
Right.
Because it's like, one of the things I'm really waiting on someone to make, and I really hope someone makes it soon, is like a tool where it's like a daily kind of stand-up tool on Slack, and you've got the bot essentially reading all of your company's Slack and all of like your Discords for users and stuff like that, and then creating essentially like these personalized daily newsletters of like what's going on and who's blocked by what and stuff like that. Like all this information exists, and now we have the technologies to start to do this type of like bespoke writing for an audience of one, about this type of thing. But it takes a while for both people to build those systems and for people to kind of be like, okay, cool, this is actually a good use of my time to do something like that. So someone build that, please, and then tell me about it.
Well, I mean, we're pretty impressed with what you're building, and we're sitting here looking at our environment and PSVR 2, and we're allowing people, they can't watch Blu-ray on their PlayStation 5 and their VR 2, and we're the only media hub that exists on PlayStation 5 and PlayStation VR 2, so that people can come in and watch that content. And now they're doing so in space or in a crazy futuristic city that's powered by Skybox AI. And we keep wondering, how far out are we from, we're already caching the next frames of a video to load into the player. At what point are these technologies working well enough together that we can integrate Skybox AI to be blowing out real-time environments for a theater that seamlessly connect to the screen, making the scene totally immersive, but the action's always happening in front of you, as opposed to the production hurdles today that people face making 360 content, where your viewer maybe look like they're watching a tennis match as they go back and forth, or something goes on behind them that it's not told perfectly, or the way that traditional stories are told. We feel like this is coming so quickly that you can just be in the Avatar world, whatever planet they're on, and Avatar 5 or whatever it is. But it feels like you guys are building that, and that we're going to get to enter those worlds at sometime in the very near future. And do you see that happening? Where do you see what's next for this space where these things are combining together? Is it an output tool that's collecting this data? Is it like a second layer to these AIs that's bringing this together? And how are you viewing that right now?
I mean, there's a bunch of things to say about this particular topic. So just from a like, how close are we to something like that? It, I think, comes down to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is how fast things have gotten, right? And how we've gone from 5 minutes, small size, terrible output, to, if we wanted to, 90 images per second of substantially better quality than that, and how that happened over the course of 3 years. So right now we're at 30 seconds, 30-ish seconds. It's actually about 20 seconds, but when you include all kind of the ingress and egress time, it's 30 seconds to generate a 8K, panoramic, seamless skybox of kind of whatever you want. So if you compare it to the timeline of the other one, then that means we're probably, like 2 years out, something like that. Wow. Because the other part of the technology you're talking about, which is like, hey, there's something on screen. Wouldn't it be cool if that was part of an environment? We actually have that feature launching likely beginning of next year, which is the ability to bring in a flat image or any image that was created anywhere, and then to essentially complete to Skybox. We call it Skyboxify. Incredible. Yeah. So that would be the other part, right? So it's not, there's nothing fundamental about it that actually can't be done today. It's just, it's too slow. But that slow part, again, like when the 5090s come out, we love NVIDIA consumer hardware, by the way. Their enterprise hardware is great, but their consumer hardware is so much better. So like we're really waiting for those 5090s to come out and to, you know, get deep penetration so that we can start, you know, putting ourselves on there. That should be a decent speed up. And then just in general, the nice part about the AI stuff has been that is that you get the optimizations from both sides. You get it from the hardware side. That's definitely happened, and it's been a big deal. But the even more significant optimizations that have come in terms of speed really have been on the software side, right? Because there's a huge difference between, hey, look, we can do this. You know, it's not just in theory any longer. Here it is working. And here it is working in a maximally efficient production, you know, ready way. And it took, you know, a couple of years to get there with AI from where we started from. And I think it's, again, like this is just the way that this is happening. Those software improvements and optimizations will continue. The hardware crawl will continue, and it gets even more interesting as time goes on. So it's really just a matter of time before the answer to your question is yes.
How are you making those decisions at the moment when you're dealing with, you know, you're generating these images, you're seeing the hardware speed up the production so quickly, and you're saying 90 images a second, and then it's, you know, previously was 30 images a second. How do you make a decision or a call on like when to change that for yourself? If the job is getting done, it's just taking seconds longer. Is that a difficult decision to make as someone who's running these AI generators on your end, or is it pretty telling? Maybe the software's indicating that, or like what's driving that decision for you to say we have to make a change here because X hardware is better? And like you just, I think you said the 5090, like is that a we have to make that change, or is that a we'll wait and see?
No, happily, we get to wait and see most of the time. The nice part about kind of all of this has been that, like in the beginning, GPU allocation was hard, and it's gotten a lot less hard and a lot less expensive now. And the players are changing rapidly. If you were talking to us, you know, a year ago, we would tell you that, you know, the big player in the scene is CoreWeave. CoreWeave's actually getting out of the kind of on-demand hosting game, though. Because they've again kind of changed the way that. Anyways, that doesn't matter. What's important here is that the cost is already quite low. So it's less about when the cost is low, and it's more about when does it feel like this is significant, and how does that fit into kind of the broader, you know, like prioritization of different feature development and stuff like that. Our biggest challenge is always that our ambitions are much greater than our resources to actually try to pull something off at any given time. So we'll bite off way more than we can chew. I am totally the one responsible for this, by the way. I love the ideas way more than I love the execution. You know, but yeah, it just becomes obvious kind of at times, right? Like it's the reason why we're not really worried about training the next version of the Skybox engine right now. We did what we call Model 3 back in spring, and it's still amazing. And we know that if we started working on something today, you know, for early next year, that it would also be amazing. But we know that if we wait another couple of months and then start at that point, it's going to be even more amazing, right? So it's really just a question of like, what's the critical mass kind of tipping point, and how do you find that out, right? Like the worst thing that you can do, in my opinion, with this stuff is wait to see other people doing it, and instead, you know, to a certain extent, you have to disconnect yourself from what other early folks are doing, and just be like, well, what do we think is right? What do we think is the right answer to this question and the right balance to this question? Because sure, we're guessing, right, based on what we know and based on what we can see, but so is everybody else. Right. So you have to have like a lot of confidence in your ability to, you know, in your ability to kind of look ahead and be like, yeah, cool, these are the broad trends.
You've been to Bitcoin podcast in 2014, and I see Marguerite just joined us as well. For anybody new to this space, we're talking to Blockade Labs founders, Skybox AI and Blendbox. We have Adam B. Levine on stage. Marguerite is in the audience. I sent you an invite to speak, Marguerite. And we also have our CEO, Tony Mugavaro, on stage, and a incredible creator from the Rad TV community, Michael Finney, on stage as well. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to put your hand up. Adam has been giving us a ton of background on Blockade Labs, their new product, Blendbox. And I would love to know, you know, I've been playing with Blendbox with Skybox AI for the last several weeks. I have the highest model subscription, so I have access to everything, and I'm loving it so far. I've probably downloaded 250 different Skyboxes, and I'm flooding our engineers with Skyboxes all the time. I'm like, I made a Skybox updates, I added more Skyboxes, and it's really hard for me to choose which ones are going to go in. So we're like talking about having some, throwing them to the community, letting them submit some to us to put in there. And I would love to know if either of you could provide like any alpha on tips and tricks for people that are using these tools, that maybe that, you know, as the founders, are there any secret sauces, you know, of words that can be used, or any little details that might help people in the crowd generate the things that they're looking to generate better or faster or more visually appealing in some way that you're willing to share today?
Sure. Yeah. I can provide a little bit here. The kind of the easy trick is use the prompt enhancer. There's a toggle on at the bottom. This used to be a premium only feature, but we gave it to everybody eventually. Toggle on the prompt enhancer. Again, it makes it so if you type in something like Cthulhu Farmers Market, it'll turn it into, you know, a couple of sentences of very useful descriptive stuff that our particular engine loves. So that's a really easy way to go from being, you know, like a total amateur who's never done that before to being someone who's generating pretty good stuff consistently. There's a more advanced kind of tip though that's worth talking about, which is so Skybox has a couple of different modes that it operates in. And like I said, we have a new mode coming, but just focused on what we do have right now. We have kind of the create mode, which creates something entirely new. And then we have the remix mode, which takes a Skybox that you have loaded and it will pass it through a new style, allow you to, you know, change the prompt on it, but it keeps all the geometry effectively. And so there are some, if you're trying to do something and you're really struggling to get it the way that you want, a lot of times what's useful is to pick a simple style, like a sketching style or an architectural visualization style, or, you know, something that doesn't have as much details, but really focuses on kind of line and composition. And you can find these typically in the artistic styles folder on Skybox. And create it there using the create function. And then once you're happy with the overall look of the thing in terms of structure, then you take it into remix mode and you remix it into the exact kind of style that you want. And the nice part about that is if you're doing, you know, like a psychedelic, you know, style, like you want the scene to have a psychedelic look, but you're just not able to kind of get that with the psychedelic create, you can create it in like a sketch mode, and then you can remix it into psychedelic, and you'll kind of get to have your cake and eat it too. So that's my other tip.
Incredible. Yeah, I love it so far. I mean, I really don't have any problems. And I think your tooltips are excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
Product feedback here live.
Hey, I appreciate it.
It's great. I mean, it's really, those tooltips have helped me a lot more. Like on most websites, I feel like tooltips are like, they're obvious, but the tooltips of like, I find it very interesting playing with all these AI tools. It's like, I have a 1-year-old, and as you tell him not to do something, he does it. And it's the same with AI. It's literally like you can't mention it to the AI.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
It's like you don't want to see people. Here's some people. And it's like, what are you doing? And I love that like it pops up and it's like, don't tell, you guys basically wrote that out of like, don't tell the AI no. It doesn't understand no. It just taking in the words that you're giving it and creating from there. So I love the tooltips. And I am really looking forward to the integrations we can do on PSVR 2. And I think you mentioned that you were going to be rolling out a new model soon too. Can you share anything on that you're willing to share publicly today?
For sure, yeah. So we're not rolling out a new model anytime soon. Next year we will.
Okay, next year. Okay.
Yeah. What I mean, like what I was saying is that you know, like if you look at I mean, it's hard for people who haven't, you know, who don't work for the company to appreciate this. But when we rolled out the first version, what we call Model 1, like that was not good. Like people really liked it because we showed them, hey, you could create full scenes, you know, but they were like, it was like 4K or maybe a little bit less than 4K. And, you know, and more importantly, it was really artistic, right? In that it didn't have kind of the crisp, realistic details that people wanted. And we rolled out Model 2 about 8 months later. And Model 2 was a significant exponential improvement in quality, got the resolution up to 6K. But we still didn't really nail realism. And then with Model 3, we nailed realism. And that was, and so anyway, and another exponential improvement in quality. So the thing is that we could certainly release a new model very soon that would be a not exponential increase in quality. But why do that? The quality is, we're working with like really large like auto companies and stuff like that who are, like the most kind of demanding about this type of thing in the world. And they're like, yeah, we think it's great. And so we're like, all right, well, then let's wait until we get that kind of new exponential thing. But yeah, for sure. Again, like the space is moving so fast. Next year, you will see another amazing step forward from us. I don't know how we will pull it off, but I do know that it will happen.
I mean, you mentioned video already. Did you say that you were going to be implementing video at some point after Blendbox? Is that what I heard, or am I misremembering here?
Yeah. So what I was saying about video is that video is a technical part of a solution for us on the Skybox side that will eventually allow us to do what we call mesh completion, which is again like you create this scene with Skybox, which is really just a 2D image wrapped around a 3D sphere with kind of the right distortions baked into it so that it looks correct. So you look around and you can't tell that, but you also can't like lean your head to the side or anything like that, right? And so there are ways to solve that problem and make it so we can go from cool. Now we created the fake kind of 2D version of this, and now here's the real 3D version from this. So that's where video comes in. We don't want to build any of those models. Those are, again, that's a really hard problem that other people are going to fight over. We would just kind of rather pick from the winners, and in practice, that's what we're doing. Is So anyway, so that's kind of how we will eventually include video. But again, it's just one of these things where it's like, when agents get better, we did a prototype last year, I think in November. So about a year ago, what we call Aurora, which was basically a agent built into Skybox AI that you would talk with and that would just do the stuff for you.
Incredible.
And so it's like that's kind of the company that we are. Is like we have our core thing. And then we look around and we say, what other cool stuff are other people doing and how can we use that? And most of these types of initiatives have like gone to prototype phase, but then we're like, it's not quite ready yet. And so they're just sitting there, but we have just a giant laundry list of concepts that as soon as the technology is ready, you're going to see crazy things with Skybox.
It feels like that's the world we live in right now. I made the joke the other day of like, I've tried all the AI tools. And as I say that, I feel like such a jackass because there's 8 tools released that day or whatever that I haven't tried. And there's people out here.
Be kind to yourself.
Well, I mean, there's people that have like, you think you have access to something that's cool or new, but there's always a new product that's on the precipice of changing everything we think we know about the space. And that's, we've been playing with that with watching all these drops on X over the past year or so now. It's like it's pretty much daily there's a new model, a new tool to use, and something new to play with. And it seems like, oh, this one's the best, and then a week later it's like, no, this one's by far the best, this one has the best movements, oh no, this one's for lip sync. And it feels like we have all these different components, and I find a common theme I'm having amongst creatives is it really feels like all those components need to come together into some interface where they can be used holistically across the one piece, because you're generating video, then you have to go somewhere else to do the lip syncing, and it's like all these tools are combining for one product, which is the creative product output. But there's nothing so inclusive like a software that is, let's call it Final Cut Pro or Premiere or Pro Tools or whatever the big production tool for your industry that it is that you're using. Photoshop's combining all these pieces, but then that image can now be brought to life. So it's like you used to start with a concept or an image and then you work forward putting those still images together to create motion. And now it's like you could just pick you could start with the video, pick out one scene and be like, I just generate from there. And it just seems so endless. It's almost overwhelming, the possibilities that are on the table in front of us and what is possible at any given moment. And who knows, what models, we can talk about the models of these AI and LLMs, but at the end of the day, what's NVIDIA got up their sleeve? What's AMD got up their sleeve? What any of these chip manufacturers doing that's going to change the game forever? So just what an exciting time to be alive and be a creator and be able to use all these tools and, work for cool companies doing things like this. Really appreciate you guys' time today. Before we go, we have we're coming together on Bitcoin, crypto, VR, AI, and you had a podcast space. You've been in the Bitcoin for a long time. Marguerite in her bio had Bitcoin. I want to make sure I get it right. Bitcoin since 2014. I mean, that's as early as it gets. Most people I meet are 2014 and later. Very rarely somebody in 2011 or 12, unless they were, really deep. So I would love to ask you both, what are your thoughts on, let's start with AI and crypto together and crypto market in general. But I know we just said 5 minutes ago that we're not predicting too far into the future, but where are you both seeing these converging? Like right now we're seeing agents, AI agents doing things with crypto and sending money back and forth. Is that the future? Is it all AI agents paying each other to do things and we all just sit back and watch this content? Any predictions you want to make? And Marguerite, thanks for joining as a speaker. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam and I actually on the side about a year ago started mapping out like what are the potentials around some agent games that we could do. And both of us, we're total blockchain geeks also. And we were exploring what other people were doing with agents on chain. And we actually both self-invested into a really mini small project with, and Adam could probably talk about what we built more, but more just the fact that we are playing in that space and thinking about it. But as far as bringing it into product and taking it seriously as a product, anything outside of like, this is a fun experiment and let's see what happens. And what happens when you throw crypto in there and put agents on chain? It's really fun, but it's also extremely risky and not something that we should be like, and let's take everybody's money and do that. But I like as an artist, so my background being in art and doing really experimental blockchain works and crypto puzzles, it's going to be a really fun sandbox, I think, in the future. I just think that there's still a lot of work in hooking these things up to build these experiences that at what point do you want to put that much effort into it being a one-off art experience or something viable that can be replayable or something you can re-experience? That was one of the struggles with my Bitcoin puzzles in the past is I lost. They were really fun to make, and they had a shelf life of maybe a month of people playing them until they solved them, or interacting with fun blockchain mechanics I had. But then, man, there were a lot of work, and you were just like, oh, and then you can't really capture it as art, right? Like it's because it's really in the experience of it.
Right.
So that kind of art is really challenging, especially when you're communicating with, and it's not something you can capture and then like go sell. Really. So there are remnants of it that I've sold over historically. But in this case of new types of experiences, we definitely made a project. We actually have a game, an AI agent game built. And it's more that we're just so busy with the actual product and services that we're building. And we want to be competitive and make that the best experience possible that we really haven't given our attention to agents. But we have documents. Adam wrote man, we were going back and forth on this, and it might have ended up like being a 200-page document. Or
it was 30 pages. It was 30 pages, but it was still real long.
But of like how we would make basically these these expandable worlds that could be roamed by agents and like with a feedback loop where the data then goes into the AI model and continues to make these next generation AI model worlds. Meanwhile, the agents are leveling up and learning more about the world. And I mean, we went really deep down the rabbit hole, and then we pulled back and we were like, well, maybe let's just, get the company profitable first.
I love that.
But I don't know. Adam surely has things to say about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two different answers to this question. As far as the longer term kind of picture of where all this stuff is going, I think what you're seeing on the crypto side, blockchains, and on the AI side are two different disruptive technologies that are disruptive because they disintermediate, right? They remove from the middle a lot of people who are very expensive or just unavailable, right? And so when you talk about blockchains, if you talk about Bitcoin, then what that is a form of money that uses a blockchain as its sort of way that it tracks who owns what stuff. And then if you look at pretty much every other blockchain project out there, they're all projects where they're tracking something on a blockchain, and the reason why the blockchain is used is who owns what stuff, without having to have a bank be the company that's like, yeah, here's what you own. And then the challenge around that is you have to have all these different banks and all these different companies that are somehow communicating, but there's no kind of canonical way to do it. Right. And so someone's in control, and that control always winds up getting abused, right? So that's the blockchain side of it. On the AI side of it, it's kind of the same thing, but it's a much like blockchains are very specifically about ownership on the internet in an internet native way. But AI is about essentially everything, right? Anything that involves knowledge, anything that involves expertise, anything that involves anything bespoke that you would want to do, you could do that in the real world today if you have enough money. But you probably don't have enough money. Most people don't. And so what we're seeing there is a technology that's making it so that barrier, that's the difference between what can a billionaire do and what can a person with essentially, like subsistence level money do, is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
We already have the same phone.
Yeah, exactly. And these are not the only technologies for which this is meaningful. There are a bunch of other technologies which I was looking at back in when I started doing the Bitcoin podcast. It was actually the 5th Bitcoin podcast I had started over the course of between 2010 and 2013. What was I saying? Oh yeah, it was unclear to me at that point if I was going to focus on Bitcoin or if I was going to focus on quadricopter drones, right? The ability to effectively have self-driving cars, but for airplanes, that can be remote controlled, or on the other hand, 3D printing, additive manufacturing, which also opens up all sorts of disruptive stuff. Those are also incredibly disruptive technologies, one around the delivery of objects and the other around the manufacture of objects, in ways that again, lower the barrier, reduce the amount of money you need, reduce the requirement. And so that, in broad strokes, that's what I think is happening here, is that across all areas of technology, we are seeing these disruptive technologies rise up in ways that are individually empowering within that particular technology, but when combined together are going to create a world that we cannot conceive of right now, but which is a much better, much more fair world that allows people to accomplish the thing that they want to accomplish without needing all of the buy-in from very rich or very powerful people. So I'm really excited about that. And that's where I think we're going in the kind of medium term. In the short term, what Marguerite said is correct. And we did actually, have you ever heard of the game of Diplomacy?
Yes.
The board game? Okay, yeah. So we took, so basically we started out and we were like, hey, what are AI agents eventually going to turn into? And what is the experience of gaming going to look like? And I became kind of obsessed with this idea that one of the things that's going to change is, instead of playing games directly, we are instead going to be coaches of AIs. We are going to have AIs that play on our behalf. And that it will be fun to watch them and to experience this, vicariously through them. And so, start with that. That is kind of my premise, and then bring it down to the simplest possible way to experience that. And I arrived at the game of Diplomacy, which, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's like Risk, except the game mechanics are easier. And really, the entire challenge of the game is negotiation, because nobody has enough. All units are worth 1 point. You don't get many units, and so you need the ability to have my army in Vienna plus your army in Rome or something like that, and then we're both working together to beat the guy in Turkey, right? And so the beautiful part about the game is that it's one of the most interesting and dynamic games that I think has ever been created, because it is truly just a negotiation game. But the brutal part about it is that all the turns resolve simultaneously. So after you go through the negotiation phase and everybody writes down what their units are going to do, then it all happens at once, and everybody can see if you got screwed over by somebody else. And so it's this super cutthroat game. That like you play it a couple of times, and then by the end of it, you're like, cool, we're never going to play this again, because otherwise I'm not going to be friends with you. I played some of that in high school and really enjoyed the shit out of it, with that caveat. And as we were kind of looking for what's kind of the starting point for this, I went out and I found there's an open source framework for doing diplomacy on the internet. And so we basically took that and a couple of other components, and we wired up we had a former CTO of mine wire up an agent dashboard, essentially, that allows you to create diplomacy players and then kind of run them. And they keep these giant, diaries of all their activities, and they negotiate with other AI players, and it's really funny because some of the AIs are really, really terrible at this. It turns out that Google's AIs are much better at this. Whereas if you try to use OpenAI stuff, because we hooked it up to OpenRouter, so you can use it like more than 100 different LLMs. But if you hook it up to the OpenAI stuff, then they basically just yell at each other, in negotiations, like over and over and over again. It's actually kind of hilarious, And so you'll get these diaries where at the end of it, it'll be like, wow, across these 7 players, they used 1 million tokens. And so anyway, so we did build that. It does work. It is super janky, but yeah, as soon as we get some time, it's definitely the intent to put it out there somewhere just so people can play with it.
Incredible. I love talking to both of you. You guys are so informed and so ahead of the curve. I would love to know quickly, how did you both discover Bitcoin? How did it come into your life? And at what point I would like to know when it came in your life, and at what point maybe you began to really see it, not first time hearing about it, but when did you really get Bitcoin pilled? And if either of you want to take that first.
Well, for me, I probably had two, I'd separate that to one being like, what is this? And the second being like, oh, this is interesting. That first one being having a family member at Thanksgiving, and I think it was 2012, run off to go wire. Adam, what was Charlie Shrum's company called?
BitInstant.
Yeah, so go wire like $50,000 to BitInstant. And I was like, what are you doing? Because that sounds like a terrible idea.
Are you getting scammed? Do you need to talk to somebody?
I've had friends get scammed over eBay transactions where someone's buying a bike and they're like, I can't believe how cheap this bike is. And they said, all I have to do is go wire this money. And I was like, and then they totally did that and then got scammed. And so my experience with this was like, anytime you have to go wire something for something that and then what are you buying? The answer, someone has no concept of this being, it's like math money, and it lives on the internet and on the blockchain, and not getting too deep about it, but just being like, how is that actually money? I don't understand. And then you have to go into this relearning of what money is conceptually and what it can be. And that's where and so getting pilled on that would have been actually Adam's probably podcast at that time was one of the first sources that I got to, where Adam was talking really creatively about not just Bitcoin, but him and his co-host talking about all the implications of what this kind of new technology means. And so that inspired a lot of my creative endeavors and dabblings into the space. And we were mining Bitcoin at home. It was before ASICs, so you could mine with your GPUs.
Oh, wow.
And then we got to mine Litecoin and Dogecoin and all the script coins that came out. And so that was really fun mining crypto. And at the time you didn't need to make a Coinbase account or anything. You would mine the cryptos and then you could go and trade them on the various exchanges, which were non-regulated whatsoever, and a lot of them
all over the place. Yeah, I had 30 accounts that were all sketchy, all equally sketchy.
Yeah, and then having a bunch of friends that were like, I'm going to make my own coin. And so the original, the beginnings of crypto Twitter, So anyways, that was fun. And then Adam and I became friends not long after that and started doing some fun experiments like a token controlled access. So like applications where if you have a token in your wallet, that can be automatically sent to you for various steps you've taken online or on a website, and then you can receive a token. Now that gives you access to a different web page you wouldn't have access to. So we made a ton of fun secretive puzzles and games out of that.
Puzzles. I was going to say, this is right up your alley. This is how I see now. I see how you're doing the puzzles.
Well, it was just it's because the medium was so mysterious for people that doing little things where at the end of this there may be Bitcoin waiting for you. You could get people to do all kinds of insane steps in order to try to get there. And so the community would come together and these puzzles would go viral on Bitcoin Talk, which was Satoshi Nakamoto's original forum, and where most of the conversations around Bitcoin were happening. And so anyways, you could just do really hard challenges that people would never do. And people made good lifelong friends out of that. I still have people that would do these puzzles and to this day have active chats where they're, talking about life. Yep. But anyways, yeah, so that was my story. I have no idea about Adam's very beginnings.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Very beginnings. Yeah, beginnings were pretty early for me. In 2000, I think it's 2010, it might have been early 2011, I came across a talk at Chaos Computer Convention. I'm saying that wrong, but the C3 thing, right? The German sort of hacker con that happens every year. So I watched a talk on there. Well, let me back up a second. So the reason why I was watching so many talks is because in 2009, I wound up changing careers and got kind of obsessed with the monetary system and came to realize that it was totally fucking busted. and that this was not an accident.
Of observation.
That this was a strategy. Because before that, again, I was pretty young. I was like 25, and I didn't really know anything about anything. And so I started really getting into kind of Austrian economics and started watching just tons and tons of talks. And so a normal day for me would be like, hey, I'm getting up, I'm doing work, and I'm like in the background, I have like 6 hours of Mises Institute talks that are just like passively going. And I would listen to things bunches and bunches of times. So anyways, fast forward a year, and I come across this talk on C4 by this guy named Jeffrey Paul, who goes by Sneak. And it was called Funding the Revolution, Bitcoin, or Bitcoin, the money for the revolution, or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I watched that talk, and it struck me so strongly that I probably watched that talk maybe 30 or 50 times over the course of the next week, and just like constantly had it on in the background, just kind of like absorbing it like a sponge. And at the same time, I had just invested in some Iraqi dinar, which is a scam, by the way. Where there's this whole fucking narrative about how it's like, oh, the Iraqi dinar, Iraq was invaded by the U.S. and so the dinar had been devalued significantly, but you should buy some because it's going to be increasing in value. And so I took it about as seriously at the time. Conceptually, it was really interesting, but practically, I was like, yeah, but this is never going to work. And so over the course of the next year, I bounced around with it a little bit, wound up getting my first BTC, which came from a guy in Washington, D.C., who you had to mail cash to. Bitcoin Morpheus was his name. Yes. So that was like my kind of entree into the thing. And then I started a couple of shows. I did a really early show with a guy named Atlas, who was the guy who actually started the Bitcoin subreddit. It was called Bit Talk with Atlas and Adam, ATOM. I was still using pseudonyms at that point. And just kind of kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the understanding of the implications of the thing, and coming to realize that there were really two distinct types of people that existed within the space. There were the engineers, who typically understood very deeply what was going on, but had no ability to articulate it, and nobody could really understand them. Right. If you were like a normal person. And then there was a normal person who was probably not that interested in it, but only because they couldn't understand the concept. And at the time, there was this, the very first show in Bitcoin that I'm aware of was this show called The Bitcoin Show, which this guy, Bruce, ran out of New York as a kind of daily video show. And that wound up collapsing because they had been kind of endorsing this web wallet in early 2013, and it created this giant vacuum in the space where there was really no content except for what was going on kind of the Bitcoin Talk forum. And that then created the opportunity for me to start my next two podcasts, the second one of which, Let's Talk Bitcoin, succeeded. And then that created the ability for me basically just to experiment with all this stuff. The reason why Marguerite and I wound up working together was because in the winter of 2013, I became really obsessed with this idea of non-currency uses for tokens built on top of other blockchains, which had just become possible about 2 months earlier with the launch of Mastercoin, which was the first kind of meta protocol. And so that then, so I started a podcast turned into a podcast network. Podcast network turned into a full publishing desk where we publish people like Dan Larimer and, Vitalik and stuff like that, writing about kind of fundamental stuff early on. And then that publishing platform turned into the first thing that had tokens baked into it at an actual functional level, where we had a forum where the way that you used the forum was you had tokens that connected to a particular forum. You could create your own forum with your own token very easily, and there were just 5 or 6 kind of core things that we got to try out first with an audience of a couple tens of thousands of people, at a time when people were like, well, what's Bitcoin? And, the Bitcoin people hated us because we were doing all this stuff on top of Bitcoin. And it was we had a couple 100,000 transactions with our LTB coin token. And they're like, oh, what are you doing with this on Bitcoin? So it was totally wild. But yeah, no, it's been crazy watching this thing go from where it started to where it is today. And in many ways, it's not surprising. This is what the kind of gravity of the situation always suggested was going to happen. But at the same time, it's pretty wild to see it continuing to manifest into real life.
Absolutely. I just had a couple creator calls this morning, and we tell people we are the only platform in the world putting on-chain video on every device, on your smart TVs, on your gaming consoles, on your VR headsets, on your mobile phone, literally every device, and you can sell it on-chain. And that has been the dream for me since I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011. I wanted to put everything on chain. I thought that's where things belonged. I didn't understand why the ledger of truth was left up to word of mouth or some publication that was printing it. It felt like at the minimum, that's a massive national security risk that we should have thought about 100 years ago. Why have we not figured this out? At some point, the information and news can be weaponized so easily. Why not just have everything on chain? And today, to know that is kind of where at least that's my energy. And that brings me to my question: where do you both think we go from here? As Bitcoin's at 90,000, hit 93K. The other day. Is everything going on chain? Are all of our future purchases at some point on chain? Is there going to be 2 parallel systems that people just fight and fight and fight to keep the old system alive? And do you guys have any plans to take Blockade Labs on chain?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
You're good. Sorry, I cut out for a second. Sense, economically. Probably more than anything. And so if we make solutions that off-chain solutions that can be still verified on chain, I feel like because scalability is going to be a problem for a long time until we make some advances in just computers. So that's my opinion. And just seeing this dream of the various solutions and trying to do things on chain and getting friction and even making apps and products with blockchain. I just think the points of friction are just so high, and the usability has to be the blockchain part just has to be invisible. And then the things that people care about and how they verify it, you're saying, the point of truth, that has to be so, and not everything needs to be directly on chain for that, but there's different types of cryptography that can support the verification process.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that life is trade-offs, and certainly that's never more true than when you're talking about blockchains. So for something like Bitcoin, like that makes a ton of sense to have on chain because you're effectively disintermediating the financial authorities who frankly manipulate and abuse the money for their own benefit and for the benefit of people who they're close to. So in that circumstance, it's like, well, yeah, Bitcoin, man. Like who cares if that's the currency, so long as that's involved with the currency at some level, then it acts as an anchor against all the bullshit that they'll otherwise try to pull and that they have historically over many years. So I think that in that circumstance, it's like, well, yeah, obviously. I think that there are other ones. Like I built a platform called Token FM in 2016, 2017. We never launched it because we didn't really want to. We couldn't do the fundraising stuff because I didn't want to launch a token. Long story.
Gensler.
But the point is that Token FM was Spotify plus Patreon with a blockchain ownership layer.
Cool.
So it's a superfan platform that is also a streaming service that uses tokens to represent effectively digital albums. So rather than going to Apple and buying the album there and then going to Amazon and then being like, well, who the hell are you? You haven't bought this album with us because you haven't paid them. You just paid Apple. Instead, there could be a registry of here's literally every, here's the common kind of source of truth that artists who sell things can push to. And then like a service like Amazon or Apple can just look at that and be like, well, you didn't buy it from us, but you did buy it from the artist. So here's, we can allow you to consume it through our platform or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I really like that idea. I think that's a really freaking powerful idea that will be really good for the world. But I also am, as time went on, became aware that it is kind of contrary to the way that we are increasingly thinking about content. In terms of like, if people want to listen to music, then they'll go on Apple Music or they'll go on, Spotify or something like that, where the concept of ownership is not really the thing. It's just the concept of access. So I bring it up just to say that I think anywhere where ownership is important and where there are multiple platforms that are out of alignment with each other. So for example, streaming video, right? Then I think that there's a ton of utility there. But I think it's important to resist the notion that everything should be on chain because most things shouldn't be on chain. It's really a question of where does ownership matter? If it matters, blockchains are a great way to do it, especially if it's a digitally native thing. If you don't need that, well, then you've just made things more difficult, more expensive, more prone to failure. Yep. And so you got to pick your battles.
Totally. We call it Web 2.5, and that's $1 trillion opportunity probably by itself. Just stay in this moment for a little while because there's still a lot of development that has to happen. But I mean, we originally started playing around with smart contracts like pre-NFT standards, and we were basically custom making an ERC20 at the time to sell a movie over and over again or sell a game over and over again. No NFT functionality with it. But what brought that about was that we were doing paper contracts with all of these major studios and broadcasters, and 95% of the 50-page agreement was boilerplate, and the first page had the revenue shares. And so that was pretty much it. And we were like, this should just be a smart contract because they all say the same thing, and the revenue shares should happen programmatically. And so we started building smart contracts. It was too soon. I mean,
I was going to say, how was adoption on that?
Zero. We could get into every room and talk to the studios because we were already working with them, and they were like, "This sounds awesome, but we don't even have a streaming service yet." So, this was pre-Disney Plus and Netflix.
I feel your pain. We all feel your pain here. For what it's worth.
We do, Adam. I know Adam does for sure.
Yeah. No, 100%. And then now it's like this just. The technology itself, just from a legal and an accounting perspective, makes our lives so much easier. And of course, we can't walk into a studio and tell their legal and accounting departments that their days are numbered. They don't want to adopt any of this. They have to justify the Hollywood accounting and keep burying things and not paying people appropriately, and that's why strikes happen. And Netflix can report what they decide to report, and so it's a little bit of an uphill battle from the studio side, but that's where creators are really coming in and saying, I'm going to play with this technology and see it as the future. So we're trying to stick with that. It's enabling it's a strong technology that we feel like there's a real use case for. It's not just like throw some memes on there and flip them. I mean, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, we played in every part of that game, but still,
Adam was buying
doing
the earliest shit coins. He was buying the dinar.
Yeah, no, this is true. This is true. I learned all my investing lessons from buying that fucking dinar.
Yeah.
He's like, well, if I bought that, I might as well buy some of this Bitcoin, whatever that.
Well, I mean, I think what I learned is that value is in the eye of the beholder, right? And that it's less about the thing and it's more about what's the story that you can tell them and what backs it up, right? And so that was, I mean, my early pushback to Bitcoin was that something like Bitcoin is never more vulnerable than at the beginning. And, I'm sure that you guys have seen lots of technology projects come and go. The reality of Bitcoin surviving in the way that it did was not at all a sure thing. So I mean, like, it's a really wild world. But the thing of it is that we have such intense real problems that with the systems that govern our lives, that there's just this hunger for alternatives, because we know that the way that things work today can't be the only way that they can work, because it doesn't work very well, and clearly things have worked better at some point in time. So it's a beautiful thing. But I did pull August up here since he had his hand up.
Yeah, come on. What, you have a question for us, August?
Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry, I just wanted to ask if Blockade was hiring, if you guys are looking for, if you're onboarding anybody, and what you guys are up to.
I love the Christmas music in the background, by the way.
Well, Blockade, so we are still in the grind, running lean for probably the next few months. But if things go our way as we're hoping and projecting, then 2025 should be a really big growth year for us, growing out our team. So if there's interest, you're welcome to DM one of us, the Blockade account, myself, and send kind of your background. Happy to get to know you. But as far as what we're doing next, we have pretty extensive roadmaps ahead for mostly Blendbox, but Skybox has a few just really big features that is going to bring it to a place that we feel like until we're ready for the next generation of the product. So we have true HDRIs coming. We have something called Skyboxify, where you can bring any 2D image and turn it into a 360 panorama. And then there's a few other more technical things about it that are coming. But anyways, that part of it is just serving such a large market by itself and doing really well that we're going to probably hold on that product there for a little while we build out Blendbox. And then once we have this design to 360 flow really built, then we're going to be thinking about, do we want to perfect that more and really live in the design space, or do we want to start venturing out into the more difficult, hard to do, bring in 3D pipelines type space? We have a lot of friends building 3D generated assets, building APIs. And so we'll be soon thinking about dynamic lighting within those environments, generating objects, platforms that want to support multiplayer experiences within those spaces. There's a lot of platforms that have the spaces like that, but with audio and chat and meetings and virtual. I know metaverse was a big topic a long time ago with the NFT boom, but there are people who have actually continued on to build those things that may or may not be blockchain, and a lot of them use us. So there's a big sandbox to play in. It's just we still have a lot of, our roadmaps are long already, and it feels like when we sit down and we ideate, we're like, oh yeah, that'll take no time, and then 6 months later,
you put it on the pile.
so anyways, that's that. I wanted to mention something that you guys were talking about with the conversation of things being on chain, and I had, before we started doing the generative AI work together, I was working on a game, and the vision of the game was to be a free to play blockchain game where the blockchain is totally obfuscated, but you have the transferable assets and you can take them in and out of the game. They're tradable, and you could collect them for free as you go. And then you would also have the more premium assets that maybe are more rare and you can get in other places. One of the big challenges of that was the indexing of all the assets. We had millions and millions of assets. And then eventually it just slowed down some of the user experience, and to which to a point where that CTO of that project kind of gave up. We hit a tipping point where the problems of fixing the relationship between the application and the blockchain experience just became so big with how many assets there were, that it broke at one point, and then he was just kind of like defeated. So I feel like that, like having so many assets and a really good application user experience and wanting all those to be tradable, there's ways to solve that product wise, but that was just something that we came up against that was a little defeating as far as I wouldn't have anticipated at the beginning of building it.
Incredible that you share that, and thanks for bringing that up, because Tony just shared an article, what was it now, 10 days ago, 14 days ago, of the European Union requiring the ability to sell any digital product that you purchase. So ownership does not mean access. Ownership means resellability and the optionality of transferring ownership to someone, which is a pretty, I think, definitive way of explaining if you own. So you can't, if you can't sell it, then you don't own it. That's pretty simple. I think people understand that. And we are getting to a place where it feels like everything is rented. Everything is held by some centralized entity that's like, oh, you can access this here, but not elsewhere. And it feels like we have to get to a place where these things are interchangeable. But how would it work on something like Fortnite, where everybody has the backpack that was given to every new player that signed up? So how many new players at 500 million? I don't even know. I'm just pulling a number out. I don't have any recollection. I don't know what the number would be, but how many of those backpacks exist, and do we really need to track them all? It does sound like a pretty, a long bridge to cross to be able to manage those things in real time, and render them in real time at the same time. You're like settling every possible transaction, checking the chain, and then rendering the game based on those things. It does sound kind of outlandish to do today, but is that somewhere we're headed with computational power? Does that get easier as we move forward?
Am I back?
I kept seeing Adam.
You're there. Yeah, I saw you unmute.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. My connection's having a little issue. I mean, so I think that there's a beautiful vision there, which is this idea that everything will be owned. But I think that what I've come, and I used to think that, like that was my core premise for a long time. And just increasingly as time has gone on, I've come to believe that the question is, what would you want to resell?
Yeah.
Where does ownership matter? When is it meaningful? And when is it worth the costs that come along with it, right? Like, again, with that Token FM thing, like the whole point there was, hey, people are getting screwed, on the music side, both on the ownership side and on the artist side, right? The platform benefits from all of it, and everybody else gets something good, but they have a lot of downsides that come along with it. And so I tried to solve that problem. And one of the things that I came to is that people do not care about owning music. There is a desire to support artists, especially artists who are, on their way up and not already huge. But people don't really care about owning it. And so if you don't care about owning it, then trying to make it so it's something you can buy or resell doesn't really matter. And so what you find at the end of that thought process is that the things that are important to own are the things that are valuable. And value is different for every person. We all have our own individual scales for it. But there is a scale that exists there, right? And so I think that is going to be a lot of the process is you look at blockchain projects and very well-intentioned, very kind of idealistic stuff happens all the time. Because there are real problems that we intellectually think we should use this technology to solve. But in practice, the theory has to match up with what people actually are going to do behaviorally. And so that's the big challenge, is figuring out not just where can the technology be applied, but where can it be applied where it already supports the types of behavior that people have, and doesn't ask them to reinvent that behavior. Right. So ownership of cars on a blockchain, that makes a ton of sense for so many reasons. And people care about buying and selling cars, houses, right? But like a sword in game that I got during a tutorial, I don't think that anybody ever is going to care about that, right? And so there's this weird gradient that you have to get through to get there. But there are definitely huge things where it's very important.
Agreed. And you said, what items do you want to sell? It depends on the person. Somebody might be addicted to crack. They're selling everything. Somebody else might have their shit together. They're not selling everything. So there is this wide dynamic of people that are viewing something that they want to sell versus something that I'm a collector of and I'm never going to sell. And for a long time, I had a pretty large DVD collection. And at some point, I was moving to California, and I thought, I'm not lugging these around, so who wants them? And to me, I couldn't believe that they would not sell for, $5 a piece or $6 for some collector's item. But, you put them out for sale or you put them on eBay, nobody gives a shit. They just sit there forever, and somebody offers you $1 or something. Eventually, you're like, just take them for $20 or whatever, whatever the energy is. But I do think there are a lot of problems here that can be solved. Like today, the middlemen, I like the idea of people holding on to things for me. I like knowing that I can upload a video and that RAD is storing it somewhere and that it's their entire business that they need to keep track of that video. That makes me feel good as an artist that I don't have to manage and keep that alive. And it also feels good to know that these options are popping up to where you can distribute something and not have to cover all the bases on your own. It's a lot of people are like, oh, you can distribute anywhere. Yeah, you can. You can put up a video on YouTube. That video took 100 people to make. Now you're going to collect the check from that and you're going to disperse those payments to whoever you owe money to. And that's your only form of accounting is like, oh, my friend uploaded the video. It's on his YouTube channel. It took 50 of us to make. He gets the checks and then decides when to disperse the money. And I feel like that is something today that is viable across the board for creators of, hey, I can upload something. I can delineate how much is going to be paid for each individual that was a part of it. And it's paid out in real time to anybody who wants to purchase it. That feels like the future, whether that's a game, a song, whatever it is. And I think like your Token FM idea, it is a great idea. It's almost like just have the one hub where the thing's uploaded to and the ownership, as long as it's backed up, but then, how many places is that backed up in? And that's, I know people that use YouTube today. They have a private YouTube account that's not available to anyone. They upload all of their work to that YouTube account so nobody can see it, but they are essentially just stealing YouTube storage space. And they're making YouTube pay for that storage that's never going to benefit YouTube in any way. So there's all these holes in the system that I feel like are kind of converging onto these better systems. And that's pretty exciting for me being in the position at Rad TV and talking with you all today. It just feels like there's so much more to be built. A lot of times you look around, you're like, we have everything. We have streaming video and audio, and I can log in anywhere. I can tell my lights to turn on, and they just turn on. Like, that's pretty futuristic. But at the end of the day, when you really get down into it, there's still a lot of people getting screwed out of their creations, out of their income, out of anything. Pretty much name anything. Banking fees. Like, we opened this conversation at the top of the hour with talking about unbanked people and the way that they have been taken advantage of. And all these problems seem to slowly be getting solved, or at least closer to a solution that resonates with the people that it affects the most, as opposed to the people that are extracting the most from it. Tony, do you want to add something?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's just, I think the general kind of abstract over the last few minutes is what you're doing, making people's lives better, and they'll use it if you are. Because people are lazy. Like, you can't change their behavior very easily, but if you can make their lives easier, they'll change their behavior for that. As soon as you introduce things that are harder. And so things like AI, that's why they just absolutely have been exploding, because you can type in a prompt and, problem solved. And, that's where it's like same thing with some of the enabling technologies around smart contracts. Everybody gets paid instantly. You don't have to track down a bunch of accounting. You can see the audit trail on chain. Everybody can just check their wallet. They can do their own taxes, et cetera. And so it's like, are you in the technology business to make people's lives easier? Those are the companies that win. Did you make my life better today? Okay,
Right.
cool.
I
Here's
don't know
$1.
anything about the internet protocols. I literally don't. I don't even know the acronyms that make them up, but I am using them
Yeah.
currently. So
Don't need
it's
to.
making it easier. Yep.
Google made it easy.
Exactly. Does anybody have any questions for Marguerite or Adam or Tony before we get off of here? Thank you all for listening today. Really appreciate you all joining the space. And I've really enjoyed the time with Adam and Marguerite, getting to know
Legends.
Yeah, incredible story, incredible company. Blockade Labs. If you haven't checked it out yet, go to our X feed, scroll through. We've reposted everything. Follow them. Follow both of them individually. We just bullied Adam into opening up his account, not making it private yesterday, so he's back on X now fully. But both of their feeds filled with incredible information, and they're really trailblazing in a really unique space at the moment. They're doing something that I don't think anybody else is doing at their level. Go over to Blockade, generate some Skyboxes, check out the Blender box, start playing with those tools. And if you have a PlayStation 5 or PSVR 2, download Rad TV on your console, log into Rad TV and put on your VR headset and check out the Skyboxes that we've been creating and that we're
soon
integrating.
You'll be able to upload your own.
Yep.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Cam, could you review, what all you guys have deployed on Rad as far as Blockade currently, and then, what's in the near-term pipeline?
Yeah, Tony, do you want to take that?
Yeah. Basically, like, we wanted to get going quickly. We started generating some Skyboxes for ourselves. We just baked it straight into the app so that we could get it out there and make it fun. And then in parallel, working on the ability for individuals to upload to their own account so they can add Skyboxes to their account and customize and personalize their account. Again, kind of more like manual, where you go into your account, you upload a Skybox, and it'll show up in your VR headset. And then the third version of that is get programmatic kind of API access. And so, what Cam was kind of referencing earlier in the conversation was the dream is that you are sitting in a VR headset, you're watching a show. We currently have a Skybox already floating in the background. And so it could technically be looking at the content, make a request to Skybox AI, and in real time generate Skyboxes based on your environment. Even based on like scenes that are coming up, and kind of change the environment real time. So there's a whole roadmap we built out in our heads. Of course, to Marguerite's point, when we sit down and have a jam session, it's like by the end of it, we're like, oh yeah, this should be straightforward. And then we look at our Trello boards and we're like, oh shit. So, we're very excited about where it's going, and we're excited to be working with them and are moving as quickly as we can, because we feel like it's rare that you find this much of shared vision and kind of the last decade of the things that we've all been passionate about. And I think it's really kind of come together perfectly in a great partnership.
It'd be fun to do another one of these. There's a lot of other things we could explore, such as
we could talk for hours for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, even when you were talking about on-chain things, like thinking about the future of AI models and ownership and contributors and being able to have a value chain. We even have concepts of value chains in our existing product and how they might emerge. But all of those have a lot of synergies with the economic layer of the value creation of these things we're talking about. Very excited for us to get to a place where the creator economy actually gets to thrive and live, and it's not going to be, the same pump and dump thing, but actual like ongoing evergreen value exchanges that have a powerful feedback loops. And you can see that if they're going to take the chains off of us a little bit, that we'll be able to explore some of it.
Absolutely. It seems like people are kicking the chains off every day, and that the ad-based model is not the best for creators or for transparency or decentralization. So we're excited about all that as well. Neil, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious what maybe items that you're trying to accomplish or kind of check off the list. I'm pretty excited about the product right now. I kind of have my own wish list in my head, but I know that doesn't matter. So I was interested to hear kind of what you guys have planned in the short term for Blendbox.
We have a product roadmap that we probably could make public, or aspects of it public, that capture a lot of I'd say the upcoming year. But Adam could probably tell you high level, just some of those things we're kicking out the door as soon as possible. We've done most of the work internally on proving out if something can work and how it's going to be put together. But then there's but can it work all together as this more larger, robust product, and any hangups that happen along the way there. So hopefully we can get it to a place where it's truly usable and can serve everybody from a novice to a professional with the features we have planned.
Hey, I have to get going, but I just had a thought. Marguerite, have you guys ever thought about sending like 3D worlds as GIFs, like a 3D world with like a message or something, or like a messaging app where you could send somebody a 3D world as like for a birthday present or some type of special occasion?
Incredible. That's what I think of when I think of this too, is you're spinning up a world. This is Ready Player One, and I just want to make a planet. I love that question. Great question.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, we actually, last year, the holidays, we were thinking about making snow globes, where you could construct a snow globe and then on the inside of it have your environment with your own holiday message, and make like using 3D object placements to build a scene. But then we were looking at that project and we were like, that looks like a 3-month project. so somebody else could build that application using us and provide that sort of a service. So if anybody wanted to build that and partner with us, we would be open to it.
I mean, it sounds like to me, that sounds like a rad TV undertaking. We're just going to start letting people upload their own Skyboxes. And at that point, that means you can download a Skybox, send it to a friend. And then once you send it to the friend, they can view it in their VR headsets. And we have a major update coming to Quest soon. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I said it. Sorry, Tony.
Alpha.
And we're going to be integrating there as well. So like that's a great question, and I think that's something that Marguerite's correct. I think that's something like we could provide that becomes a community aspect of sharing these worlds that you're creating and being able to experience them inside of a VR headset. Douglas, go ahead.
Hang on. We didn't actually answer Neil's question. We didn't actually answer Neil's question. So I want to be respectful of that.
Yeah, sure.
So just the very short answer to your question is that so we're in phase 1 right now. We're at the beginning of it. A total of 3 phases. Next week we should be shipping upscale and then also a time-lapse export feature. So you'll be able to export creation time lapses. That assumes that everything goes well. Testing's been a little bit rough on that feature for some reason. By the end of like this month or early next month, we should be wrapping up phase 1. That will also involve an enhance function where you'll click a button and it'll send it through a slow model that will kind of just not upscale, but significantly improve the quality. So we're thinking about things like that. We have a ton of transform controls. And we're looking at other stuff. So like that's all really short-term stuff. Like this initial phase will take us essentially to the end of the alpha. And then phase 2 is what we call the refined toolkit, which allows you to have a lot more control over how you're integrating particular elements in rather than just treating them all as one thing, which right now the mode, which we call live create, that's what we've launched so far, that you don't have a lot of control over how one thing is treated versus how another thing is treated. And then next year, by the end of Q1, we should be launching phase 3, which is effectively a relighting engine that will allow you to kind of have the same level of control as a photographer does in like a very intensive post process, but very, very easily. So that's the very high level of the roadmap. There's a bunch of additional details on there and other kind of stuff, but that should give you an idea. Okay, and now Douglas, your turn.
Hey guys, my name's Doug. I was a big Neon District fan when that was around, and I was just curious what you guys read for inspiration. I read books like Three Body Problem, Neil Stephenson, stuff like that. And I find a lot of parallels to what you guys are doing and that kind of like ideology. So I was just curious if I'm kind of tracking there and if that's kind of just curious about what you draw inspiration from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Neil Stephenson is super key around all of this stuff. I think Marguerite and I were reading him, like the influential part time for us is probably 10 years ago with him. But he did a really good job of kind of exploring these ideas. And I think that he's been one of the most influential people. Snow Crash is the obvious book there, but I would actually point you to a book called REMD, which is Read Me with the D and the M transposed. It's a book that he wrote later, and it's a book that talks about this fictional MMO that's built in this very procedural way. And I would argue that the adventure in the book is not very interesting, but the setting that they build to tell the adventure is fucking fascinating, and has some of the most forward-looking parallels around what work will feel like once we really get into this next kind of mode of civilization that I think I've seen before, where you're sort of marrying VR within real-world stuff, and it feels like you're playing a game, but actually that's having some type of effect in real life that is a very productive thing. So lots of really interesting stuff in that. Outside of that, decentralization is, I think, a really, really important concept to understand. And if you have not read on it, then there is a very short book that is probably the most important thing to read, which is called The Starfish and the Spider, The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. It's a tiny little book that is not about cryptocurrency. It's not about anything at all. It's actually about the Taliban. But it talks about the power of these decentralized systems. And with Bitcoin, it's a one-to-one. But with a lot of this stuff, again, with any sort of disruptive technology, you are in fact disintermediating kind of the center and creating a decentralized system, even if it doesn't necessarily feel like that. So I would point to that line of thinking as well as something that's really important to understand.
Thank you.
Marguerite, anything to add there to Douglas?
I was actually just thinking, I was like, when was the last time I read a book? I don't know. It's been a while. I've been going more down like alternative rabbit holes than I have gotten into any long form reading in the past year or two. But I'm looking forward to, so I have goals such as company not being so stressful and products not being so stressful. being able to like sit with myself for a while and think about these things. More than anything, I've been diving into short-term art projects with other artists in the space for like a 48-hour binge session in which I'll like discover some really weird government document and I'll send it to Adam and then use it for information somewhere but then I'll move on back. Like I haven't had a chance to really have big breaks where I can relax and read like that. But I should, and I'm looking forward to it.
It's hard to have any downtime right now. I feel the same way. And like the last
doom
year,
scroll.
Yeah, last year's been incredible. And then even I think people think now we're in a bull market for crypto, but I felt this same energy since this time last year, even a little bit earlier. That it's just been ramping up to this moment. So I've pretty much been locked into Rad TV and the crypto sphere. Adam, you don't have to raise your hand. Just interrupt me. It's your space. We're hosting you.
No, brother. No, brother. No. So I wasn't planning on talking about this because I never talk about this in the context of anything to do with technology or crypto. But actually, Marguerite is right. I also have not been reading many books along these lines because I did most of that type of visioning reading a long time ago. The stuff that I'm reading right now, though, is totally outside the realm of what you would think. And I'll mention it just in case it happens to spark something for someone else. There's a book called Vibrational Medicine by a guy named, he's dead now, Richard Gerber, MD, that deals with an alternative understanding of what the human body is and how it works in ways that, as a science-based person, I have found more compelling than any of the conventional understandings. And then separately, there's a book called Energy Work by a guy named Robert Bruce that also is very, very interesting. So totally not technology related, either of those books, really.
Manifest.
But very, very interesting material if you're looking for, again, like if I'm a leading indicator of where we're going in 5 to 10 years as far as the stuff that I'm thinking about, and I've always considered myself a proto hipster in that way, that's what I'm thinking about right now. So have fun with it.
I wanted to add that like things I'm doing are more. So I have 4 boys, and my oldest being 14.
Yeah, God bless.
And so,
Wow.
so when I get downtime, it's not really downtime, right? And so something we've all gotten into as a family is the like one-shot Dungeon and Dragon campaigns.
Sure.
And we hire a professional dungeon master to come to the house, and I've decorated it all so it feels very vibey, like you're either in a dungeon or whatever the theme is.
Incredible.
And everyone's in costumes, all the kids, and so there's usually a few friends that have a huge just spread of food so we can just eat like that for 48 hours. And we just get into this campaign. And at first, I didn't know how to play Dungeons and Dragons. The kids started to get into this. But now, like all the grown-ups, we are all just really into it. And it's really fun. Just the imagine. I never did that when I was younger. I don't know about you guys. But I get so impressed with the creativity of the children and the things they'll do and just their role-playing capabilities that I find just inspiration and joy in those real-life engagements right now. So we spend so much time in technology, both Adam and I, that we get so excited to get offline.
Sure.
LARP, absolutely. We just went to the Minecraft pop-up experience, and it's like a giant pop-up in a warehouse, and my kids were absolutely losing their minds. And of course, I'm getting in there and breaking blocks, and it's just a great escape.
I want to be mindful. I know you said 90 minutes yesterday, Adam, and here we are over that. So last question, and I'd like to wrap it up with this for both of you. Where are we in 5 years, Adam? You kind of threw that on the table there. Where do you see us in 5 years? Give us a recorded Bitcoin price in 5 years, if you don't mind. And where are we with AI in 5 years?
That's classy. Very nice. Very nice.
On the record.
You got it.
Yeah. It's always very hard to predict price, and I tend not to think about price when it comes to this type of stuff. What I think about is where are we as far as in the narrative cycle, right? And where we are in the narrative cycle right now is that Bitcoin is ascendant. Now that Trump has won, the stuff that he's said at least has really interesting implications for both the future of the US dollar and relatedly the future of Bitcoin. Bitcoin at $100,000 is something like 0.03% of global wealth. So like $100,000, again, like when I first started looking at this stuff, like Bitcoin was trading under $1.
Yep.
And so now we're to a point where, there's 21 million of there out there. It's an insanely liquid market, and it's, going to break $100,000 probably this year. So 5 years from now, I think it could be anywhere between $500,000 and, like $5 million.
Amen.
Really just depending on kind of what happens. So what was the other question?
Yeah,
what was the other prediction?
AI, where do you think we're at in AI? And it doesn't have to be 5 years. It could be just like, where are we headed right now? And like, is everybody have an AI assistant and a robot in their house in 5 years?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. So like I said, the thing about AI that's particularly crazy is that it's not just exponential in pace, it's exponential in rate of acceleration, because as the time goes on, you have more and more companies that are getting into this and doing their own unique thing with it. And most of those will fail, but the reality of it is that, a lot of them will succeed, and those will become the next kind of giants of the world. The interesting part about the AI stuff is really that while most technologies, when they have this cycle, are really empowering a single company, right? A single company or a small cohort of companies that share the market, that's not really what's going to happen with this. What's going to happen with this is we're going to have chips in our phones and every device that can run very large or very powerful AIs that do stuff. So I think the thing that I am very confident will happen within 5 years is that the execution challenge will be solved in probably 50% of situations. The physical world stuff is harder, right? Like we see it with self-driving cars. You just need to build a stupid amount of data And that's what all the Teslas out there are doing today. Is they're really big, data set building machines that are getting us closer to the ability to have enough data to maybe solve the problem for real. Maybe. And that's going to be true with household robots and stuff like that as well. So right now you can definitely use AI in ways that are useful to you, but they are single parts of a problem. You can solve specific things, oftentimes with a lot of work. The amount of work it's going to take is going to go down dramatically. The amount of time it's going to take to do that is going to go down dramatically. And the amount of things where you can go from here, do this, to it's now done in a way that actually solves the problem for you will go up exponentially. So that's like the low end. Assuming we have no big breakthroughs, I think that it really is very transformative even in 5 years. And I think if we do have breakthroughs, like if we do get another really substantially improved model that starts getting into like web actions, as we've started to see from like the Claudes of the world, where they are starting to have LLMs that are actually doing computer use. I mean, if that really starts to break through, then we could find ourselves at, not 50%, but 200%, right? 500%. Suddenly it's not that we've solved all of our traditional execution challenges, but we've actually gone so far past that now we've created new execution challenges for ourselves that are completely inconceivable today, and we can pull those off too, right? So it's really hard to predict, but the one thing that we can predict is the direction that this is going. We just can't predict how deep we get into it in that period of time because there's a ton of variability.
Sure. Great answer. Tony always says, he says this at least once a day usually, is AI is as bad as it will ever be today. And that, I think that's a pretty important way to look at it. And you can just say it every day because it's not going backwards.
Totally.
I used to think 10 years ago, I thought my godson would never drive a car, and he's 10 today. I thought he would never drive. And now I think he will be driving in 6 years. And his parents don't think he will. His dad engineers for Tesla, and he doesn't believe he will. But I believe that they still will be driving in 6 years. So it's interesting how even my perspective has shifted drastically over a short period of time. Marguerite, how about yourself? What are you thinking about as far as Bitcoin over the next 5 years? Where are we headed?
Well, I was just going to say that my 14-year-old sure isn't going to be driving.
Denied.
That's a motherly choice, though, right? Not an autonomous choice. That's not allowed to drive.
Well, so if you look at the price action of Bitcoin since, let's say, the last 5 years, gosh, it's been fluctuating between 20 to 60. It was really kind of going back and forth in that range. I think that is a huge support area now, and I think we're moving on to the 60s to 80s. I'll say 60s to probably somewhere close to 200 for this range for maybe another 5 years, and it living within that space. I don't think it could just go straight up, but this is what we always say.
I know. It's weird how the narrative always makes it back to the crypto's about to take over. There's no going back. And then a year from then, it's like nobody wants to even hear about crypto,
So let's say we go into this super manic mode where crypto gets to close to 200 or 150, and then it goes back down to 80. 80 still, if you think about it right now, 80 is still pretty freaking high as far as the value. Yeah. And so I don't know. We'll see. There's so many with what's happening politically, though. I think that actually really changes the game. And I think it makes it way less predictable with a couple things: adoption, people making really cool things that drive greater adoption in various products, consumer products. So that, and also with people wanting different treasuries for not only just states and countries and businesses, but right. you could see more adoption of that. Like I'm thinking with Blockade, I can't wait till we're profitable and I can be putting a certain percentage of our revenue into a treasury every month that is, Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatever, and how exciting that'll be to have that.
Pennsylvania just announced today that they're going to do a state reserve.
Yeah. So, and with all the DeFi tools, you can have these assets and not even sell them. You can take loans out There's a lot of things you can do and still hold on to your assets. So I don't know. So I could be wrong about that. If it were to stay with what it just did in recent history or the history of Bitcoin, then that's what I would say. But because of these other considerations, there's so few of the world that actually have been exposed to the asset. And all the institutions are getting into it. So it really hasn't hit retail yet.
Yeah, agreed. And another thing you mentioned, the political realm for its effect on the industry. It looks like Gary Gensler is considering resignation. He just put it's all over right now. It's the top trending topic right now. I love that you both are so into crypto. We'll wrap this up, Marguerite. Where's AI in the next few years? Where is your head at there? And maybe what's the next major milestone that you see? And then we'll close this up. Thank you both again for your time.
I think that some of the things most of my friends who are game developers or engineers in general, things that I've noticed a lot of what they're talking about is robots and robotics. And so I think that we're going to see some interesting use cases of robots in our real world within the next within 5 years, that will seem, I think, more sci-fi and unexpected and like just a difference of how things used to be. When that starts to happen, I don't know how unaffordable it will be. But I had a friend last night I was talking to, who's a pretty forward-thinking game developer, and he had purchased a $100,000 robot from China that he plans to not only integrate with various AI systems, but also remote activations and getting it to do. He's planning to basically shoot an AK-47 with it and make a whole viral video out of it.
He's got the remote Terminator at the house, guarding the house, walking around. Oh my God.
From his Apple Vision Pro headset, right? And he's like, he knows that'll just get a lot of attention.
I mean, that is Ready Player One. That is literally what they put on a headset, then they become the robot and they go walk around the world.
But the robot's in real world, though.
Yeah, that's what it is. They're controlling it in Ready Player One. They put their headset on, so they're in the real world, of course, as a being. They put the headset on. They're in the virtual world, and then they load themselves into the virtual world that then controls the robot in the physical world. That's really it. That's crazy. He's going to do it now.
Yeah. So, but so when I think about what the nerds are excited about, and look at Elon Musk and these others, that's what they're excited about. They're excited about robots and all the crazy places conceptually that can go. And think about robots in space. If we actually do push to get to Mars, and we're going to need more robots, and we're going to need
TARS.
That's a big difference I see as far as AI and robotics and the sort of systems that complement or support us in things we couldn't have done by ourselves, being new types of tools. And I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I definitely think it's going to be different than what we've done so far.
Sure. Absolutely. Great responses. I have loved today's conversation. It's been one of the funnest NFTV spaces that we have done here. Thank you both very much for joining us and for your 2 hours of time. We were talking with Blockade Labs, the two founders, Adam B. Levine and Marguerite. Marguerite, will you say your last name for me? I know that maybe you don't want to say it here. That's fine.
I want to hear how you think it sounds.
I don't want to do it. No, you just tell us, and then I'll know.
deCourcelle.
deCourcelle. Okay. Beautiful last name. Follow them both, or check our X feed. Follow them both personally. Follow Blockade Labs. Make sure you're checking out Blockade Labs and the Blender Box. Tony, do you have any last minute questions for our guests before we wrap up?
Oh, no. This is incredible and really appreciate it. Learned a ton. We are excited to be working together with you guys and build the future. So let's go.
Yep. Thank you both again. Marguerite and Adam, do you have anything to share? Any final statements to share before we end this?
No, I'm just, looking forward to if we follow up and do something fun in the future.
Oh, we absolutely will be. We love what you guys are doing, and we're excited about a deeper integration. Anybody who's listening, go check out Rad TV apps on all of your devices. If you're on PSVR 2, download it and check out our Skyboxes. It's the first thing you see when you log into our VR2 app.
It's going to Quest too, I think this week. Yeah.
So you'll be able to see on Quest too. If you have a Quest device, log in and check out our Skyboxes. If you generate a cool Skybox, drop it to us on X or in Discord, save that JPEG file, and maybe we'll integrate it into our app. Adam, thank you so much. Marguerite, thank you so much. This conversation has been recorded. We will be uploading it to Rad TV, so you'll be able to listen to it post the 30 days recorded here on X. And again, make sure you go check out Blockade Labs, follow them on X, check out everything they're doing, and follow these founders. They are absolute trailblazers and thought leaders in the space. They've been crushing it for over a decade, very early to Bitcoin, very early to AI, very early to VR stuff. Follow them and make sure you're paying attention to what they're doing. Thank you, everybody, for listening. My name's Cameron at Rad TV. Follow us and check out radtv.com. Search for Rad TV on all your favorite devices. Have a great evening. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
They're breaking down the walls, empowering creators to answer the call. Web3 and AI, now they're leading the way, distributing and monetizing a brand new day. Putting power back in hands, creators and fans unite. With apps on every device, they bring delight. Oh yeah. Revolution of creativity, it's taking flight. Rad TV, the future is bright.